God bless you and welcome to Sunday School. I'm Elder Rob Wilson. Thank you once again for allowing Sunday School to be a part of your regular schedule. Now, our subject today is a blessing for Ishmael and Isaac. Blessing for Ishmael and Isaac. We'll be looking at Genesis chapter 21, verses 13 and 14, and verses 17 through 21. And then we'll move to chapter 26 and look at verses 2 through 5, and then verses 12 and 13. Now, God can make a great nation of anyone if he chooses to do so. So that's what we see in our lesson today. He blesses Ishmael and he blesses Isaac. Ishmael became a seed of Abraham, but Isaac was the promised seed of Abraham. So God is able to bless both. So when we look at our lesson today, it's starting in Genesis chapter 21, verse 13. And it says, "And also the son of the bondwoman, I will make a great nation, or I will make a nation, because he is thy seed." Now, how do we get to this particular point where God is speaking this to Abraham? So we back up a little bit at the beginning of this chapter. We see that God had visited Sarah, and she has conceived a child, and she gave Abraham this son that he always wanted at their old age. So the Lord visited Abraham he visited Sarah just as he had promised to do. And Abraham called his son Isaac. Now, Abraham was 100 years old when his son was given to him by the Lord. And Sarah said, "God has made me laugh." Of the thing that she really couldn't set her mind to believe at first has now finally happened. No, once Sarah laughed at, kind of jokingly, that no way that this could happen, because one thing, I'm of an old age and I'm barren. So she laughed jokingly a couple of chapters before, but now God's promise has come true to her, and now she's laughing at this unbelievable miracle that has happened in her life. Now, some time had passed by, and then Sarah saw the son of Hagar. Now, Hagar is the handmaid of Sarah, who she had promised, or she had given over to her husband Abraham to bear him a child. So she sees this son of Hagar marking Isaac, or perhaps marking her, because Ishmael was the firstborn. He was the firstborn seed of Abraham. And the rule kind of goes that the firstborn usually be the heir of the father. So she says unto Abraham, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son." He said, "For the son of this bondwoman cannot be heir with her son." So she wanted them out of the house. So this was very grievous to Abraham, because this was his son that she was talking about sending out, into nowhere, or out into the wilderness. So this was grievous to him. But God spoke to him. God spoke to him and told him to not be grievous, or don't be worried about what is going to happen to your son or to the bondwoman, to the bondwoman. He says, because all the things that Sarah has spoken, listen to her, hearken unto her. And then he gave Abraham some assurance. He told him that, "For in Isaac shall thy seed be called." For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So Ishmael wound up being the seed of Abraham through the helper of Sarah. But he didn't take the place of Isaac, who was the chosen or the promised son. So this is how we got to verse 13 and the blessing that God spoke about Ishmael. Now in verse 14 it said, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Now this word Beersheba means a well, which was there, but Hagar couldn't see it. She didn't see this well. So now they are in the wilderness. They've been sent away. Now this is not the first time that Hagar have left this situation with Sarah. Now if we go back in Genesis chapter 16, after Sarah came up with this idea of using her helper to help bear a son for Abraham, after she was pregnant, there became a lot of contention or friction in the household or in the tent. And it got so hard and it got so bad that Sarah was very harsh to her. So she fled. She fled to the wilderness. And in the wilderness, that is where she met God. And God asked her, where is she going? Where did she come from? So she replied that she was fleeing the face of her mistress. So God told her to arise and go back and submit herself unto Sarah. Now, we wouldn't think that we being in a bad situation and being done wrong, something that totally not our fault. If we leave that situation, we're not really expecting God to tell us to go back, and then especially to submit ourselves to that person. But he told Hagar to go back and submit herself unto Sarah. Now he also told her, as she was pregnant at this time, he also told her what to name her son. And that son's name was to be Ishmael. Now that word Ishmael means God hears. And in our next verse or later on in the lesson, we'll see that God did hear the cry of Ishmael. So this is the second time that Hagar is leaving the home of Sarah. So now they are out in the desert or the wilderness, and the water that Abraham had given them is all gone now. So they're now in a hot, dry place perhaps. So all the water is gone, and now she lays her son in the shade, and she sat down and she weeps. And she said, I don't want to see the death of my son. And in verse 17, God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called unto Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee? Hagar, fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. So once again, that name Ishmael means God hears. So this shows us that when we're at our weakest point, when we are vulnerable, God hears us. He hears us. So he heard the cry of the lad where he is or in his condition. He heard Hagar's cry in her condition. So it don't matter where or if we cry out loud or within ourselves, God hears us. So God says in verse 18, he said, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thy hand. For I will make him a great nation. Now, this is the same thing that he told Abraham, but now he's telling this to Hagar about her son. She's telling her to rise and hold him because he is going to make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes. Remember that she was there in the wilderness of Beersheba, and she didn't see the well, and Beersheba means a well. But she didn't see the well, so God, in verse 19, he opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and she filled the bowl with water and gave the lad drink. So God supernaturally opened her eyes. This same well that was there, but she didn't see it until God supernaturally opened up her eyes. So that's the same way with us sometimes. Sometimes our trials get so hard. Sometimes we get in distress and we don't see clearly. And God had to come and supernaturally open up our eyes so we can see the path that he has for us. So that's how God works in our lives. So verse 20, and God was with the lad. God was with the lad. Now this is Ishmael that we're talking about. This is not the promised son of Abraham, but this is the son of Hagar. So God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. He was skillful with the bow, and this was important because of where he actually had to live. Now, when we move to Genesis chapter 26, we move from the blessing of Ishmael that God spoke up on him. Now we move into the blessing of Isaac. So in Genesis chapter 26, verses 2 through 5, and then verses 12 and 13. Now verse 2 says, and the Lord appeared unto him, talking about Isaac. The Lord appeared to him and said, go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Now that sounds so familiar. This is the exact same language that God used with Abraham. He used his same language with Abraham to go into a land where I will show you. So that word there, dwell, means to stay. So in verse 3 it said sojourn, which means to remain there in this land, and I will bless thee, and I will be with thee, I will bless thee, for unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. So there's a difference between the lives of Isaac and the life of Abraham. Now, the life of Abraham was one where he moved from country to country, from region to region, and did the things that he was supposed to do and obeying God. Now, here in Genesis chapter 26, when speaking of Isaac, he tells him to sojourn, or to remain in that area, not to go to Egypt, but to remain in the area that he's in. So he tells him some things. He said, I will bless thee. I will be with thee. Now, these are some of the promises of things that we hear God speak to his people time and time again. He spoke these things to Jacob. He spoke these things to Moses and Joshua. And he speaks these things to us today. So he said, I will be with thee. God promised us that he will never leave us nor forsake us. He said, I will bless thee. And that word bless means to kneel in adoration to him. Kneel in adoration to God. But when he blesses us, it means that he gives us or he provides benefits for us. So we bless him by kneeling in adoration to him, and he blesses us by providing benefits to us. Now verse 4 says, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven. So God began to tell Isaac how he's going to bless him. He said, I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So this is the same thing that he told Abraham. Through his seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So God gives 5 reasons why he will bless Isaac. In verse 5, he said, because that Abraham obeyed my voice. That's number 1. He obeyed my voice. Number 2 is that he kept my charge. Number 3, he kept my commandments. Number 4, he kept my statutes. And number 5, he kept my laws. So God gave these reasons to Isaac that he was going to bless him, because he got blessed because of the obedience and the faith of Abraham, and because he's Abraham's seed, which God said, I'm going to bless your seed. So Abraham had one of the hardest tests that we could think of, and that test was when he had to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. So that was a hard thing to do, but it showed his faith and his trust in God, and trust in God's commandments, that whatever God said, that he would try his best to do that. So God continued to bless Isaac. In verse 12, he said, then Isaac sowed in that land, the land where God told him to stay and to dwell in, and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him, which means the Lord added benefits to him. And the man waxed great, talking about Isaac, the man waxed great, and went forward and grew until he became very great. Now that term right there, waxed great, that means that God enlarged him in his body, in his mind, and his property. God enlarged his territory. So he became very great. Now God immediately blessed Isaac, gave unto him, and he waxed great. So God blessed both Ishmael and Isaac to be great, to be a great nation. Now that word can be transferred, that word nation can be transferred to people, groups of people. So he blessed them to be over groups of people. So God created the Jewish people out of the descendants of Isaac. And he created the Arab people out of the descendants of Ishmael. So God was able to bless both of them, even though Ishmael came in a way of being impatient. Speaking of Abraham and Sarah, no, God had promised them a child, but they didn't wait. They decided that they could make this happen on their own. So that's why Sarah used her handmaid to bear Abraham this son. So not only does God make promises, God is a keeper of promises. Even when we get impatient like Sarah and Abraham did, and God sometimes have a original plan for us, but sometimes we are so impatient that we try to do our own thing, or try to make our own blessing. Now, Ishmael was born before Isaac, but that didn't put Isaac in last place. Isaac was still the chosen one. Isaac was still the promised seed of Abraham. So We came after Ishmael, but that don't put us in last place. Being a seed of Abraham, it eliminates the theory, or it eliminates us from being in the last place. But being the son of Abraham, it puts us in the best place. Well, that's our lesson today. And until next week, we just pray that the Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. In Jesus' name, amen.